Welcome to the Antisocial Podcast. This is episode 199. Almost there. Almost pushing at that 200. And before we get into this week's episode with Bob Nalbandian, my name is Andy Dowling, and if you're new to this podcast, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy it and come back and listen to more episodes. I've got 198 previous episodes that you can start sifting through. I know a few of you kind folk have started from number one and you're slowly working your way through them all. Bloody champions. But if you're new, thank you very much. My name is Andy Dowling. I host this podcast, and I'm also, if you didn't know already, the bass player for the Australian metal band Lord. If you love a bit of heavy metal, especially in the old school vein, a bit of Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, etc., go and check us out over at lord.net.au. We've got a brand new album out right now called Fallen Idols. You can check that out on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, eBay, Discogs, Bandcamp, which is our official store, lordofficial.bandcamp.com. But to make it really easy, just go over to lord.net.au. You can check out the new album, links to everything, merchandise, the music, our whole back catalogue's there, video clips, the 2 video clips from our new album. So those are Welcome Back, United Welcome Back, and also Kill or Be Killed. But we've also got the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 odd video clips from our back catalogue as well that you can go and check out. But everything's over there, nice and easy, lord.net.au, go and check it out. In addition to being a heavy metal warrior, I also host the Self-Starter podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment, and freelancing. So if you are in a really shit job and you hate working for the man, and you want to get out, go and check out the podcast. There might be a dose of inspiration for you. If you know somebody out there, or maybe yourself, and you are self-employed, or you have your own business, then maybe there could be some best practices that you could learn from some of these people that are featured on my podcast. I touch base with lots of different people from different backgrounds, different industries, talk about how they got started, what their background is, and some of the challenges that they've had being self-employed, and some of the good stuff as well. So lots of interesting things, lots of different backgrounds, and it's a great way to learn and share best practices and get some reassurance, because it's not easy to be self-employed. So it's good to hear that other people share the same challenges that we all have, being out there on our own, taking our own initiatives. So go and check it all out, selfstarter.com.au. You can find it in the usual podcast haunts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, more than likely you'll be able to find Self-Starter there. But selfstarter.com.au. Shout it, shout it, shout it out loud. Oh God, these shout outs, they're getting punished. They're really becoming a punishment. Sorry, good folks. Every week I thank somebody that supports me in the podcast, and it could be anything. The fact that you guys listen to this podcast is amazing, but these little 1% extras go a long way. It could be things such as a bit of social media love. It could be leaving a review somewhere on the internet for the podcast. It could be guest recommendations, a message of encouragement. It could be buying some merchandise from the online store. It could be shouting me a beer via the PayPal button over at andysocial.net. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It just helps. It's a massive, massive help for me, small or big. It just keeps this whole thing moving. So thank you very much. This week's shout out's a little bit different. Again, I've been doing a few little different shout outs along the way, but this one is for Andrew Cochran. Andrew is from Huskinson. I can never say this place correctly, even though it has been up until recently about 20-minute drive from my home. We call it Husky down the south coast of New South Wales. But Andrew is getting a shout out because, well, Andrew bought a Judas Priest CD from me on eBay. I think it was Ram It Down. No, it's British Steel, sorry. He bought a British Steel CD off me on eBay. And I decided, well, here's a guy that lives on the south coast. He clearly loves Judas Priest. Why not send him a Lord CD? So I had some old Set in Stone promos lying around. And so usually what I do when someone orders from me on eBay or Discogs in particular, but I also do with the band, is I will include some extra stuff, some stickers and little dribs and drabs, and write a note on there, like a handwritten note, just saying, hey, thanks for grabbing the CD. Hope you enjoy it, blah, blah, blah. And I might put a little plug in there, mention the band or the podcast or whatever it is. And Andrew got the Priest CD, and he got the Set in Stone promo CD. And what he's done is he's found me on the internet. So, hi, Andrew. I don't know if you'll eventually listen to the podcast, not sure, but reached out to me and made a post on social media with a picture of the Priest CD and the Lord CD, and just said, how he'd never heard of the band, and now he's listening to it and he loves it, and he's listening to the band on Spotify now as well. And a bunch of people have commented, and it looks like we've got a few mutual friends as well, and just fantastic. And now I have managed to convert another person to Lord. Woohoo! I'll take a commission. Thanks, Lord Timothy. But so Andrew is getting a shout out. Thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate it. I mean, you guys don't have to do anything when you get anything in the post from me, but the fact that you took the effort to take a photo, put it on social media, and talk about it is just really, really cool. And it's those little extras that go a long way. And are a massive help to us collectively as a band and myself individually. So, Andrew, thank you so much. When you eventually listen to this, I'm not sure if you'll dig into the podcast or not, but if you do listen to this, please reach out to me again, shoot me a little message, and I'm going to find some extra little goodies to send out to you in the post as well as an additional thank you for your support, because we all love getting something in the mail. Now, in addition to all of this shout out stuff, I also have a page which is dedicated to all of the things that I sell on the internet. So speaking of which, before eBay, Discogs, etc., if you go to andysocial.net/buy stuff, you'll be able to find links to the online stores for the band, for the podcast, for my eBay store, for Discogs, and for anybody curious, eBay has just a random mix of all sorts of stuff, just decluttering from home. So there's music memorabilia, there's CDs, there's DVDs, there's books, there's clothing, there's all sorts of stuff. So go and check all that out. You'll find some weird things on there every once in a while when I find stuff packed away in boxes that have been collecting dust. And Discogs has got about 1,600 CDs, records, cassettes, DVDs, metal, rock, punk, blues, jazz, pop, whatever. It's all on there. Heaps of stuff on there. So if you do decide to buy something from any of these platforms, please make a little mention in the message or in the comments, just to say that you heard me crapping on in this podcast, and I'm going to add some extra little goodies in with your order, just to say thank you. And it's great to know that people are listening to me shit on through these intros as well. So a few little shout outs just to say thank you for people that have been buying from these platforms. What have we got here? Kai from Asheville in North Carolina. NC, is that North Carolina? I think it is, in the US of A. Jay from Bundaberg in Queensland. Mark from Grantville in Victoria. Phil from Currum Downs in Cranbourne? Anyway. Hi from Cranbourne. Oh my God, Andy, fuck it hell. Cranbourne North in Victoria. Crystal from Bondi Junction in New South Wales, and David from San Antonio in Texas in the US of A. Thank you very much, folks. Really, really appreciate it. Once again, if you go over to andysocial.net/buy stuff, you'll find all the links there. And yes, please include a message, and I'm going to add some extra goodies to say an additional thank you for supporting me. Alrighty, folks, episode 199 is with Bob Nalbandian. Bob is a legend in the LA metal scene. He grew up with the guys from Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and the likes. He was the man behind a fanzine, and I put emphasis on fanzine. You'll understand why in our chat. The fanzine was called The Headbanger. And The Headbanger was a really integral part and an influential part in the promotion of a lot of these iconic bands now globally, these amazing metal bands. Bob was right there on the ground with these amazing acts and artists, and was able to help promote bands throughout the country, not just in LA but across the United States, and started to help bring exposure to a lot of these bands internationally, especially in Europe as well. So Bob's got a massive history with metal. Since doing the fanzine in the 80s, he's went on to work with labels. He's done a lot of different work. He became a director and producer. He's done the Inside Metal documentaries. He did a documentary called Band versus Brand. He's got an upcoming documentary coming out early next year called Godfathers of Thrash, I believe. Sorry, Bob, I don't have the notes in front of me, but I'll put links in the show notes, by the way, folks. And that's coming out early next year. And Bob's just a really, really busy guy. I met Bob in 2012 at Headbangers Open Air in Germany. Bob was a manager for a band, Californian metal band in the 80s called Eden, and Eden reformed for this band for this festival in Germany in 2012, which Lord played. And so we got to meet Bob, connect, and stayed in touch since then. So after all these years, we finally got to reconnect, have a chat, and learn a little bit more about Bob and his background. And he's got some amazing stories, and we only scrape the surface. I know some of you guys will be more familiar with Bob and will know that there's heaps of great stories that he has that he didn't share in this chat. So we'll have to definitely do another catch up down the track. But all the links will be in the show notes. I'll put direct links to check out the documentaries and how to pick them up. There's still DVDs available. So some of you DVD people that love the tangible product, they're still available. But you can also stream them online. And I'll put a bunch of trailers and all sorts of content over in the show notes over at andysocial.net. But for now, please enjoy this awesome chat with Bob Nalbandian.
Yeah, I've been around. I'm one of those old guys. I'm 54 years old and lived in, I grew up in Huntington Beach, which is Orange County, which is just about an hour south of LA. So, I feel very lucky that I grew up in such a great era of, great early 80s metal, when the whole movement, of early 80s metal, the new wave of British heavy metal in the LA metal scene was starting to explode. And, I was right there, hands on. I mean, I lived, like I said, in Huntington. Lars lived in Newport Beach at the time. So my good buddy, Patrick Scott, became friends with Lars Ulrich before he formed Metallica, when he just moved over from Denmark in like 81. So we would go over to Lars's house and check out his record collection, just freak out on it, and knew, the beginnings of when Metallica started with Dave Mustaine and, of course, James Hetfield and Ron McGovney on bass. And then, saw the very first shows of, from the, glammier bands from, Motley Crue and Rat and Great White, who were Dante Fox at the time. They were a local Orange County band, and saw all that stuff up through the heavier, the beginnings of Slayer, when they were like a cover band and all that. So it was really cool to be there. I mean, you had no idea at the time, that this music would just, explode in this worldwide phenomena. You're just thinking these are cool local bands that you want to support at the time. And it was a really cool time, man. It was just so pure and, it was, I feel very lucky.
Well, you answered it just then, but one of the things I was going to ask you is, what it felt like at the time, because I think it's always in hindsight where you look back and go, oh, geez, like, there's some pretty special moments that you would have had, but at the time it would have been, this is fun, and just roll with it and see what happens. Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of how we looked at it. I started a fanzine in early 82, I think March of 82, the Headbanger fanzine, just as a fan. I never realized that, people nowadays, would say that, would quote my magazine as being this legendary, thing that turned them on to all these bands. Because it was one of the first to, review bands like Metallica. We did the first Megadeth interview, and that, we basically exposed Armored Saint and Slayer in the Headbanger before, any other of the magazines or fanzines at that time. Of course, the magazines weren't touching any of that. You just had the fanzines, and, you had, Ron Quintana's fanzine out of San Francisco, Metal Mania, and another one out from that area called Metal Rendezvous, John Stranansky and Bill Hale. And, you had the Crucible and Heavy Metal Thunder in LA and Kick-Ass Monthly in New York. So you just had these handful of magazines, and of course, or fanzines. And of course you had Kerrang, which just started in England, and Metal Forces in England, and Aardschok in Holland, Shock Power in Germany, and Enfer and Metal Attack in France. So, it was a tight-knit, metal community then. And everyone knew each other. We were all pen pals, with each other. And it was just a really cool vibe, man. It was just, it's nothing like, people talk about the community on Facebook and social media. It was a whole different thing. It was, you had to, take the time to write letters and dub cassettes and trade them back and forth in the mail, but it was a lot of fun, man. Great time. Yeah, I was going to say,
trying to stay up to date with what was happening at the time, you know, it's very different to what it is now. I mean, you can just click the mouse or tap on your phone a couple of times and you found new music, and you can go down this rabbit hole of bands and subgenres and all sorts of stuff with ease. But back then, I mean, geez, it would have taken you a long time to find out what's going on. You'd have to wait for the postal service to kick in and bring that next dub cassette of new music. I mean, it would have been a completely different set of circumstances to what it is now.
Well, that's what made it so cool, because it was that anticipation. You know, you have to wait for a package, but when you got it, it was like Christmas. You know, it was like, yeah, you know, I'm the excitement, and everyone was just so enthusiastic about the scene and about breaking new bands and exposing new bands to people, because this was the only way to do it, through tape trading, basically, and you know, and through pen pals and doing the fanzine, and then you had college radio and stuff like that. So yeah, it was cool. How it's amazing how bands got, you know, recognition worldwide from just, you know, demo tapes. They didn't even have to record albums at that time, you know, and you know, it's you know, unfortunately, it'll, you know, obviously never get back to that. And now everything is so saturated. But, you know, back in the day, I mean, in the early 80s, if you had an album out, even on an independent label or a single out, that was a big thing to have a record out. You know, it was, you know, it's not like today where anyone could put stuff out, you know, and record stuff. It was something special back then, for sure.
How did you actually physically put together the webzine? Was it something like when you first started, just photocopying, you know, sheets of paper and just stapling it together yourself and passing it around to your friends? I mean, what did it actually look like, the mechanics behind it?
That was actually it, man. We photocopied it was it was a folded paper, so it was a little bit smaller than the regular magazine size, and we got it distributed through like Green World and which became Enigma, and Important Distribution, which became, you know, Combat Records and Relativity. You know, that was all through Important Distribution at the time. And we got it out in the record stores and stuff, all the independent metal stores. But it was funny. I would go to a local printer, print about 3,000 issues, and hand fold and collate them all and staple them. So it was great. I mean, sometimes I had the guys from Slayer come over while we're dubbing their videos. I would have them folding and stapling headbangers for them to take home, because, you know, they were featured in it and stuff. So I was getting everyone to fold that. You know, I had headbanger folding parties when my parents were gone. I would invite a few friends over to have some beers, but I say, hey, if you're going to hang out here and have some beer, you got to help me fold these headbangers, because I would need to get 500 of them the next Monday out to Important, you know, distribution in New York or whatever. So yeah, it was pretty funny. But yeah, it was all, I mean, it was totally independent. You know, it was all self-made, and which was cool. I mean, it was a lot of work and time consuming, obviously, but, you know, the rewards were that much better.
I'm just relating that to even these days with our band. I mean, we're so DIY. I mean, we keep everything in house. We control everything that we do, and that definitely has its pros, but it also has the cons that you're also investing a lot of extra time to make sure that everything stays afloat. But I get a real thrill out of, I mean, we package all of our own orders, like when we sell stuff, and we just had the new album come out not too long ago, and, you know, a lot
great album.
Thank you.
Love
and
it.
A lot of pre-orders and everything. So I'm sitting, you know, in my office, and I've got hundreds of CDs lying all over the carpet, and I've got packages and tape and everything, getting ready to get this little almost like the production line happening of just packaging up all this stuff to send around the world. And you sort of look at it in the moment, and you go, oh, this is so painful. But as you said, it's so much more satisfying to know that you've put so much extra effort into what you're doing, knowing that it's going to have an impact somewhere else. It's being sent off to the other side of the country or the other side of the world, and it just, you're just so much more connected to what you're doing.
Absolutely, Andy, and that's so cool that you're doing that, and it definitely will pay off in the long run, especially owning your own masters and the publishing to the music and merchandise and all that. So many people just sign away on that, and 5-10 years later, they're wondering what's going on, why they're not making any money, and it is really important and to have that hands on, especially if you enjoy it. That's the main purpose. You got to enjoy what you're doing, and you have to have that self-satisfaction of, yeah, I did this myself, and it just feels good, and it's something that you could be proud of. And it's great that your fans are still into buying physical product and supporting you guys, buying the whole package and merchandise, and you're doing the mail order stuff rather than just them clicking on Spotify or whatever. That's obviously that it is what it is, and that's not going to go away. But it is cool that you could still have those fans that appreciate the physical product, and they appreciate that you've gone the extra effort to put into this product when it comes to making a really cool artwork and booklet and all that kind of stuff. I think that's great, man.
Yeah, cheers. And I mean, one thing that we've sort of really pushed hard in the last few years, but especially with this album, is it's that throwback. And not a complete nostalgic trip, but just thinking back to when we held music in a different way, and we had different. What's the best way of explaining it? We had more value associated with music, and I think for us, being able to really sort of celebrate the CD, or just the packaging, or just like a handwritten note that we'll put in there sometimes, or like stupid stickers, or anything extra in these parcels where people can see that they're getting something tangible there, and it doesn't appeal to everyone. And as you said, like, the market is the market, and you move with it, and you've always got to be flexible. But I think a lot of people are sort of hungry for that old feeling of reconnecting with something on a real grassroots level. And I think everything's digital these days. I mean, we're moving in a direction of paperless society, and people are starved for this sort of real sort of hands-on experience where they get to connect with something on a different level like they used to. So I think for us, we've seen a bit of a resurgence with CDs, because I think people are really sort of looking for that experience, and we're just trying to, I guess, put a further spotlight on it as well.
That's true, man. It definitely is. And, vinyl's coming back too, and a lot of areas, people want that, experience of that analog experience, although a lot of the vinyl releases was recorded digitally, but still they like that analog experience of listening to, and it is always cool seeing the whole package, and that's what I loved when I was a kid about, records, and opening the sleeve and reading the lyrics and looking at the pictures and stuff. It was a cool experience. And, it's cool because you being from Australia, I mean, now it's back then in the 80s, it was so different, each country, and it was so cool to discover bands from other countries, and they all had a certain cultural sound, whether you're from England, the new wave of British heavy metal, or Sweden, which was more, very melodic metal at the time and very classically influenced. And then you had the French bands that sang in French, and, the Dutch bands, and it was all a different experience. And then you had the, Australian bands. And I remember, a Buffalo from the 70s.
Yeah, wow.
And, of course, AC/DC, of course. And then that, being into AC/DC so much, I got into the Angels, and they were, on import, and the No Exit record came out. I just fell in love with that. And of course, Rose Tattoo came out, I think, the year before their debut in '78. And then I remember getting stuff, from pen pals in Australia, bands like Taipan and Bengal Tigers from the early 80s. And then, of course, Hobbs Angels of Death, who we hung out with and played with at the Headbangers Open Air Festival in Germany. That for people that don't know, that's how I met Andy in 2012. But it was cool, man. It was so cool because it was like, here's some bands from all, on the other side of the world. And I got pen pals in Australia, and I'm seeing what their musical metal culture is like there and how it changes here. And they're sending me their cool shit, and I'm sending them their cool shit. And, it was just a real excitement and a real cool vibe. And, I think that's missing a lot. I mean, now bands, usually you could hear a band, you could kind of hear, oh, they're from Sweden, or they're from, Denmark or something. But now it's, it could be a band that sounds like Korn that's from Poland or whatever. It's like, it's everything's so universal now, and all these bands, no one's really doing their own kind of thing or something that they've, grown up with their own cultural influences. And I kind of miss that in metal. It seems like everything internationally, worldwide, is all the same sound, that's production, that same Pro Tools kind of production. And it's just nothing really is stands out like it did back in the day.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, when you're growing up now versus, 20, 30 odd years ago, you used to be just, all you knew was your circle of friends, your immediate community of people that you connected with. And it was always a small bunch of people, and it would only be what was brought into that group that you were influenced by. And that's not just music, it's everything. And these days, it's either an algorithm or, it's this global network that you start to tap into, where you start to make mutual friends on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. And then you go down these rabbit holes of music and information. And it's, I mean, in some ways, like, incredible. It's exciting and never been easier to learn about the world around you. But at the same time, it makes it difficult to, I guess, potentially be unique and to stand out or cut through the noise, so to speak. It's not to say that it dilutes it, but it just makes it really hard to make something unique where you're not constantly thinking about the several hundred influences that you now have versus probably 5 or 6 influences that you may have had 20, 30 odd years ago.
Yeah, you're right. And that's what makes it, I think, so difficult for young bands today, is to really stand out and to be different from the pack. And now it's with technology, it is so diluted. There's so many bands out there. Anyone could put records out. And don't get me wrong. I mean, you got to embrace the new technology. And I've gone down those rabbit holes as well on YouTube and other stuff, discovering bands that I had never known from the 70s and stuff, or footage. Before, I used to have everything on videotape. Everything now that I spent hours, years gathering a catalog of video footage from concerts and staying up late night watching Don Kirshner's recording stuff. Now it's all on YouTube within just a click. You can watch anything. It's made so easy. I don't even have to throw on my DVDs or videos anymore. It's just, you just watch anything. So it is simple, and it is cool to, it is still cool. You still do get that feeling when you discover new bands that are really good, and, even maybe old bands that you hadn't heard of in the past, or old concert footage that you haven't seen. On YouTube now, just recently, they uploaded like the full Cal Jam 74 and all these different live footages from, MC5 and Grand Funk and Zeppelin and all this other stuff that, just got posted through this company just a couple weeks ago. And I've, just the past few days been going down a rabbit hole of some of that stuff. So, it is cool. And it's just so easy now. People don't know how easy they have it, and it makes it, where it's that easy. I don't know if you don't appreciate it as much, because like you say, it's the fact that you're, putting all this time and effort into doing this. You get more of a self-satisfaction, from it. And now it's just, so easy, so, disposable. It's, it's a whole different thing, but, it's great. It's always great that there's new bands out there and, discovering new stuff. And, it's basically, it is what it is. It's the future, and it's only going to get, get more technical, and it just makes you kind of wonder and a little bit worried about how the music industry is going to survive in the future.
Well, I think there's always, it's having that balance, isn't it? I mean, you got to evolve. You can't sort of stay in the one spot and just cling on to the past. But I think having the balance of understanding why things are popular, why do people like things on a real sort of grassroots level, like what makes something appealing to one person versus somebody else. And I think there's a lot of things such as your human interaction, and I think a lot of organic things, using air quotes, where people find affiliation and loyalty and can relate to things out of very basic criteria, basic ingredients. And I think for us, like, it's moving with the times and trying to stay up to date with all the changes and looking for the next thing in technology or the market, but also understanding that, people appreciate a handwritten note, people appreciate a sticker, people appreciate at times a CD still, or it might just be at a show and hanging around the merch table and talking to people while they buy your t-shirt or something like that. And it's those real sort of organic moments that I think people still connect to and still put value in. And I think if you can find that balance between both of them, then you're probably in a good position.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And I think that's what's missing with a lot of bands, is that personal experience. And I think, like you said, meeting with the bands in person at the merch booth and talking to them in person is so much more of a personal thing than just, messaging them on Facebook or whatever. It's and that's what I think is missing with a lot of bands. But you're right. Yeah. And I tell bands, if you're in the business, you need, a lot of bands that are completely ignorant to the new business model of digital marketing and social media and Spotify and blah blah blah. If you're totally ignorant to it, you're not going to make it, no matter how old school you want to be. I mean, it's cool, you want to release something on vinyl and do this and that, but you got to at least have a knowledge of how the new how things are marketed these days and the new model of the music business if you want to survive. And that's what's important, is you don't necessarily have to totally give into it, but you have to be aware of it and like you said, find that balance of what works best for you. You could still have that personal touch, like you said, writing a note with the CDs and meeting the people after the show and doing the meet and greets and that kind of thing, which is special. I think the fans really do appreciate. And so as long as that continues, I think the music will still thrive. But it seems to be getting less and less like that, where everything is just online and social media, and it's you don't even know if these people are for real or not, because you never. And sooner or later, you're not even going to be seeing them live. You'll just be seeing holograms of them or whatever. So,
well, we've started to see a bit of that already.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking they're going to start seeing them of new bands, even bands that aren't even deceased, bands that are too lazy to tour. Let's just put a hologram of us and send that out on the road.
Did you see many changes in those first few years of running the Headbanger, where you're helping to sort of highlight these bands in your part of the country, but also connecting with other people on the East Coast and overseas? Did you start to see changes happening around you where this music started to explode? Did you see yourself personally changing what you were doing as this music became more and more popular?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you really saw the impact in different areas, like particularly LA with what they call the hair metal bands, and San Francisco with the thrash bands. And of course, New York had their scene of thrash, and you really kind of saw things changing. And I remember from, even New York, say, from, the metal that went into the New York hardcore band, Bad Brains and Cro-Mags and that kind of stuff. And, Anthrax, the thrash and Overkill, which were kind of half and half. And they, it was morphing into a heavier sound. And, I remember that whole
whole thing going, which was cool. And it was just, and you had people that, liked both, and people that, some people hate, thrash versus glam, and you had these different which was kind of cool. It was, it was fun. It was just like, man, it's so many different, styles of metal were coming out during that time, and then you had the stoner bands. I mean, the early days of Trouble and Pentagram, of course they were doing, the Sabbath thing or whatever. So it wasn't, super original, but you had that St. Vitus and there were a lot of different sounds and different, you did see a lot of changes. And of course, in the 90s, you really saw it when it became, the alternative and grunge, but, even back in the 80s, and you saw the impact of when things just got ridiculous and kind of out of hand with the glam scene and MTV and the hair metal, and how that got so commercialized, and that it was just a cookie cutter effect of bands, just bands that weren't even from LA just coming to LA, looking like Poison or whatever, and that's kind of when it got ridiculous. So you saw that too, but there was still that the underground movement was still pretty heavy up through the early 90s, I think.
What was it like for you as far as your web scene was concerned? I mean, you did that for a few years. Did the web scene get bigger and bigger during that time? Did you find that that helped? I guess from your point of view, and you can talk yourself up, of course, but do you think that it had a bit of an impact during those growth years of these genres of music with the web scene?
Yeah, it's actually a fanzine. This is way before the internet. So
I'm so used to saying web scene all the time.
we call it fanzines, which was basically a magazine, but it was handmade, Xerox kind of thing. And it definitely changed. I mean, I went from like a few hundred issues to, I think the last issue was about almost 5,000. But I had no business mind. I was a kid. I was a fan. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know, how to get advertisers and all that. I just saw that it was growing, and that everyone I sent it out to, we all knew each other. All the other magazines all looked at the other, Slayer, for example. I was, the first to expose Slayer with their ads, and then and their ads, which was brilliant on their part. I believe Carrie and their old manager Stephen Craig came up with the heaviest, fastest band in the U.S. Because before that was Metallica's moniker. So of course everyone's like, who the fuck is a Slayer? So everyone around the world was hitting me up about Slayer and other LA bands, Armored Saint and Megadeth, and then in New York, Bob Muldowney would have, the Rods and all these New York bands. And everyone like myself would hit him up for what's going on in New York. And then you had the Canadian people, Wayne Archibald and KJ Dalton and in Oregon. And, he was, exposing Wild Dogs and, Black and Blue at the time before they were in LA, and all these other bands from Oregon and the Seattle area. Metal Church and all that stuff. It's like, wow, who are these bands? So, everyone was looking for other areas of music, to find, and you usually got them in the fanzines. And that's, I found so many people that I talked to, 30, 40 years later are telling me, or at least, 35 years later, telling me that they discovered Megadeth or so-and-so from reading the Headbanger, so I never knew it back then. I had no idea, but it's pretty cool to hear. So yeah, I mean, without sounding arrogant, the fanzine, even though it only printed like 4,000 issues, it made a huge impact to people, again, because once I did an article on something, you would have all these other magazines, Art Shock and Metal Forces, and even magazines in like South America, would Rock Brigade would want to hear about these bands, so you would send them the demos, and they would write about it and stuff. So I think the magazine, the fanzines, people don't realize how much of an impact. If it wasn't for the fanzines, all these bands, Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, Exodus, Overkill, they wouldn't have survived, man. None of the major magazines. You didn't see Cream and Circus and even Rip. Rip maybe later on, but not in the early 80s. None of these magazines, except maybe Kerrang! Kerrang! Would, out of England, would eventually do a thing on Metallica and a thing on like the thrash metal scene or the LA metal scene, little blurbs. But as far as doing big features and stuff, it was all the fanzines that exposed these bands, and college radio, no major radio or anything. So it was truly underground. So yeah, I mean, not just me, myself, but the whole fanzine community had a huge impact on the heavy metal scene and what revolutionized the metal scene. Because if it wasn't for us, we made the underground accessible. It would have just been your typical radio kind of music at the time that you were hearing, the Foreigners, the Journeys, all that kind of stuff. No radio stations even fathomed the thought of ever playing Metallica, major radio stations or major magazines. They all thought, that stuff was crap, and it wasn't until the fanzines and due to college radio and to the independent labels like Metal Blade and Shrapnel and Megaforce and Combat, that took the risk. No major labels, were signing these bands right off the bat. It was all the independents. And as soon as they grew, they're seeing, wow, this band's already sold 100,000 records on an independent label. Then the major labels would come on. Then the major radio stations would come on. So, you couldn't have got to that level without the fanzines. So people don't realize how much of a huge impact the fanzines were back then.
Was there a particular reason why you stopped with the fanzine? So how many years did that go on for? Was it several years?
Yeah, it was just money and time. I went from 82 to 85, so only 3 years, but it was a huge 3 years. So much had happened in that time, and during that time, I right after that, it was just, I couldn't take it to the next level because I would have needed investment. And like I said, I didn't know business. I was 18, 19 years old. So I didn't know really, and there wasn't really a model. What I kind of modeled myself off was Metal Rendezvous, because they took the leap and I started working with them after the Headbanger. And they started out same year I did in 82. And they were a Bay Area fanzine, but they got some investment and they turned into a regular magazine. And I think they were doing about 80,000 issues at the time. So I started working with John Sternansky and Bill Hale with Metal Rendezvous. And in fact, John Sternansky co-produced and narrated this new Bay Area Godfathers documentary I'm putting out. And so that's what I did. And then I started managing Eden at the time. And in 80, I was managing them in 84, and then they got their deal with Enigma in 85. And then after that, I was just too busy to continue on with the Headbangers. So I laid it to rest.
I mean, you certainly have done a lot of different things over the years, and, and no doubt the fanzine stuff probably set you up in a way of having the knowledge of the industry, connecting with all these bands and watching them grow and being a part of that journey, that it would have set you up to move into some of these, different stages of your life. Because I think, you did a stint with Roadrunner at I think in the early 90s, I believe.
Yeah, it was 91. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously contributing to a lot of other press out there. I think you did stuff with Hit Parader as well, and being I think in probably more later years stuff with Century Media as well, and just working really heavily with metal over the years. And even as you said before, with grunge coming in the early 90s, you've from my side anyway, it appears that you've just always been sort of very fixated and a part of the metal world for the past several decades now. It's been incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of us stalwarts that kind of stuck with metal, and it was tough. I know a lot of people, when the scene changed, and and you see there was so many bands, so many bands changing from a glam rock hair metal sound and image to changing more into grunge, and then that usually never worked. When these glam bands tried to go trendy and keep up with the trends, and for a business model or for a businessman, it's a lot easier. I know a lot of people that that obviously started with metal that went on to be very successful working in labels and other stuff, doing grunge and alternative and even pop music, which started to explode, obviously, all in the '90s. But yeah, I kind of stuck with it. What I did, after this short stint with Roadrunner, which was great, and it was before the label really started to break, but just before they signed Slipknot and Nickelback and all that, it was Sepultura was their big band at the time with. It was the second album, Arise, I believe, that was we were working. The first Typo Negative just started coming out, so it was in the very underground stages, which was fun. I worked for Herb Cohen's Bizarre Straight Records. We wrote for many different magazines and did some stuff, music editor for a few men's magazines in LA as well. And then in the '90s, I did a lot of licensing. Like I said, a couple things with Century Media and other labels, because I found out that in Europe and Japan, they still love that '80s metal sound. So a lot of the bands that I had, continued working with, we got license deals with labels overseas, and that I helped secure. So yeah, it kind of kept me going, and I did other stuff, and but it was that was my love. If I'm going to do something, I want to work with stuff I love, and I started to get into some publicity and stuff, but I just thought that was just bullshit. So this is when the publicity hype machine started in the mid to late '90s, the whole TMZ kind of, tabloidish kind of bullshit, which I always hated. It was just so far removed from the underground, metal roots that I was in. And now it was just all this about commerciality, and, it was just kind of this fakeness. So I actually did work for a couple PR companies, and worked with people, at the time, but it just never, I just couldn't get into it. It wasn't anything I really enjoyed. So yeah, I stuck pure, and, never made a whole lot of money, but I think I was a whole lot happier doing what I did. So,
well, I mean, you definitely got a reputation, and these bands that you worked with in the early '80s and sort of were really part of that journey for them. I mean, you're held in high regard by a lot of these guys. So you've got your own legacy there. I mean, people really respect your contribution and what you continue to contribute to this style of music that we all love.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, it feels good. I mean, it was a family back then. It was, we all worked together, and there were very few of us, and very few still around, that are in the music business that were there from the beginning. So, I think people do appreciate that, and it's cool. It's just like I said, it is like a metal community, and I know the same people for the last 30 years. When I do my Skull Sessions podcast, I recently had Gene Hoglan and Sin Curran on. Gene from Testament and Sin from Ministry, and I've known Gene since the beginning, and it's just so fun to talk about the old days, and their memory is just amazing, how he remembers all the stuff we used to do, and the tape trading, and the concerts we used to go to back when he was 14 and I was a few years older, and it's something I think embedded in everyone's mind, no matter how successful they might be. Everyone remembers those the embryo times of when they started, and yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's cool to be a part of that. I think that's something special. And like I said, I was fortunate. I grew up in the right time and era in the right place, so it all worked out.
I mean, you mentioned Lars before. I mean, when he first moved out, I mean, you know, those guys have celebrated you in recent years, or have made you part of their celebrations with, you know, looking back at their past as well. So it's, you know, it's a wide range of incredible individuals and bands that that really, you know, have seen what your impact has been.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel privileged, you know, to still be a part. And you know, it's funny. You know, we featured Lars in the Inside Metal documentary series, as you know, and he's been in all the episodes. And I remember when I was meeting with him, I was kind of like, man, this is going to be weird, because I'd ran into him over the few years, you know, since they became huge. But like throughout after he left LA and moved to San Francisco, we, you know, pretty much lost contact, and I would only see them occasionally when they would come into town, and, you know, they would usually hook me up with passes and we would meet, and it's just kind of a hello, hey, how's it going? What's up? You know, but to actually sit down and talk with them, you know, 30 years later, this guy who's now the biggest rock star in the world, I thought, man, is this going to be weird? But dude, it was just like talking to him back in 1981. I mean, he is still like the huge fan that he always was, and he still was just, you know, just like me and him back in the day talking. He remembered everything from back then. It was like things haven't changed. So that's kind of what's weird about it. All these people that you talk with, you know, when you get down to a personal level and you just start talking one-on-one, it really hasn't changed, man. It's like we're the same people. We're just metal fans, you know, and they're just metal fans that just happen to become hugely successful. But still, you know, you strip everything down, they're just huge fans of that kind of music, and they still have that passion and that hunger, you know, whether it be the guys in, you know, Metallica, you know, Dave Mustaine, the same way. I mean, we've got great conversations, you know, and just talk about the old days like nothing has ever changed. And I don't even look at him or these other people like these huge megastars. They're, you know, when you talk to them, it's just like, oh yeah, this is, you know, my metal buddy I grew up with, kind of thing. And that's cool, you know, that, you know, so there are certain bands that have changed, but I'm fortunate the ones I've, you know, talked and met with, you know, Slayer, the same, you know, they're all kind of, you know, you kind of get, you know, obviously in public's a lot different because they got a million people trying to meet and talk to them. But once you kind of get that one-on-one experience with them, it's kind of like, fuck, man. It's, you know, you're the same guy that you were 30 years ago, kind of thing. So yeah, it's really cool.
Was a lot of this stuff sort of the motivation behind getting into documentaries, you know, sort of going back and remembering, you know, why you got into metal in the first place, and sort of the love of and that connection that you had with people, and sort of celebrating or I guess putting a spotlight back onto these moments that you had in the past? Was that some of the motivation behind getting into a lot of the documentary stuff that you've been doing?
Yeah, in a way, I guess. You know, it's funny because I kind of got into the documentaries. It wasn't really, you know, I had no idea about making documentary films when I started. As far as the Inside Metal documentary series, you know, I knew Joe Floyd. He had been a good friend of mine, and he was in the band Warrior, who were one of my absolute favorite band from the 80s, Fighting for the Earth, that album. And he had, you know, become a really successful producer in the 90s at his studio with Warren Croyle called Silver Cloud. That was, they recorded tons of bands out of LA. And, you know, Warren had been working started a film company, and was releasing a lot of different kind of films, a lot of conspiracy kind of films. And Warren Croyle's an old metalhead, and he talked to Joe about doing a documentary. And Joe suggested, you know, we got to get Bob involved in this, you know, and Bob could, you know, be the director. And so, you know, thanks to Joe, he got me involved, and we talked. And then, you know, after talking, it was kind of like that, because I told him, look, I want to, if I'm going to direct, I think we should do this, you know, kind of from a fan's perspective, not, you know, not a perspective of MTV or whatever, just sensationalism and this and that. Let's go way back, man. Let's go before
the MTVs. And that's why I wanted to get the Van Halen era and the first inside metal pioneers of LA hard rock and metal, of the Starwood and all these bands that a lot of people hadn't heard about, you know, Snow and A La Carte and Greg Leon Invasion and, you know, Max Havoc and, you know, Stormer and Smile and, you know, Yesterday and Today, who were playing the LA clubs a lot, Legs Diamond, and, you know, all these different bands. You know, some of them had records out then, some were just remain local bands, but these bands were huge. They were selling out everywhere, and they were a big influence, and they played right beside Van Halen and all that. So, you know, yeah, from a fan's point of view, I wanted to do that. And same with going into the latter documentaries. I didn't concentrate on just the big bands, and that's why I kind of cut it off at 86, because I didn't want to cover the same bands that every other documentary covered as far as the hair metal scene, and doing the Poison, Guns N' Roses, Warrant, all that. So I cut it off then. And, you know, we did a lot of the, you know, the Rats and, you know, Black and Blue and Steeler, Keel and all that. But we also did, you know, like Leatherwolf and like I said, Warrior, and August Red Moon and Eden and, you know, Racer X and London and Pandemonium and a lot of bands that people forgot about that weren't necessarily household names, but played an important role. And same when I did the LA thrash metal, you know, the rise of LA thrash metal. We featured a lot, and people were, wow, I didn't know that LA has such a huge thrash scene. I was like, yeah, because everyone thinks Hollywood, you know, of, you know, Hollywood Sunset strip clubs, which was all glam. But, you know, you had on the outskirts, you know, the Balboa Theater, Fender's Ballroom, Olympic Auditorium, all these places in East LA where thrash metal in LA thrived, you know. You know, I always say 3 out of the 4 big 4 thrash metal bands came out of Los Angeles. So, you know, I wanted to get that and get some more of the underground bands. And we're taking that same approach in this new movie that's going to be coming out the beginning of the new year, which is called Bay Area Godfathers. And that's one of the reasons I've been up here in the Bay Area. We got a lot of interviews of not just the thrash bands, but again, some of the really influential bands from Yesterday and Today onward, and, you know, major players in the scene like Mike Varney and Bob Gamber and Bill Burkhardt, who sadly passed away shortly after the interview. You know, people that ran the record companies and record stores and of that era, and all the bands from the glam, from the Davy Vanes to the you know, Testaments and Exodus and Death Angels. So, you know, that's always fun to put together to make it kind of you know, just about the whole scene in general, the whole hard rock metal scene and how it evolved. And then I did this other great documentary, which was totally out of left field for me, which is Band versus Brand, more on the business end, which was for Cleopatra, a great company. They hired me to do, you know, I was talking to Brian Pereira, the owner of the label, and talking about, you know, we were joking around about how there's all these 2 different versions of Rat and Great White and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to build a documentary about that. And that's kind of what, you know, what evolved into Band versus Brand, which is, you know, what we were talking about the business earlier. And that's something that is really, you know, again, you got to know the new business model. Now the new business model, we're talking about we're joking about the hologram, but now it's a very serious thing. And they're saying, you know, so many bands are going to start using the holograms and all this new technology in the future. And it's all about branding the name, because you could go out as a band like Foreigner with no original members and still sell out big venues. And most of the people don't know or don't care. As long as the band sounds great, you know, and you're the owner of the name and the owner of the state, you could do that, you know. So it's a whole different ball game, and you know, what you could do with, you know, not just the music business, but the entertainment business in general. And, you know, and we emphasize how important it is to own your rights and to own your trademark and to own your merchandise and to own your publishing. And that's why I said with you, with Lord, you're doing the smart thing by owning everything, because who knows, 30, 40 years from now, Lord could be the biggest thing in the world, and you will own everything. You will be the Lord, Andy. Lord Andy.
I'll be laughing with all my stacks of money. Or it won't be stacks of money, it'll be stacks of digits.
Of course.
With the documentary stuff, I mean, speaking, you mentioned about Godfathers before, and you're in the midst of working on that. I mean, what sort of time frame and investment are you putting into each of these documentaries? I mean, what sort of time span do you look at for collating all the interviews and the information and storyboard and putting it all together?
Well, we've really took our time with this one. I was for a change, I was actually pretty smart when putting this together when we first started doing the LA interviews back in 2012 for our first one, The Pioneers of LA Hard Rock and Metal, which was the first Inside Metal title. I thought, well, we were looking at, because we didn't know what we were going to do, if this is going to be one movie or if it could be a series or what. So I kind of went in the notion when interviewing these bands that we would make it for a series. And when I interviewed people for the LA documentaries like Lars Ulrich and David Ellefson and Dave Menichetti from Y&T and all these people, I had in mind San Francisco Bay Area. Let's talk a little bit about that. So a lot of the interviews featured in this new movie were taken from the same interview sessions from back in 2012 about these guys. But it won't sound dated because they're talking about the early 80s experience when, Megadeth's first time going to the Bay Area, Lars from moving from LA, and Metallica first playing in the Bay Area. And of course, Dave Menichetti, starting Y&T and playing, since 73, 74 in the Bay Area. So, we started back then. So as far as time frame, it was, we really took our time on this one because, I had a couple, movies in between that I was involved with. And so the most recent interview we did was with the great Jason Becker. And we had his mother translate for him. And we added some great footage of that. And I had my partner, Alex Gray, who did a lot of the filming. And then I mentioned John Stranansky helped me out with a lot of the interviews and did the narration. And Danny Shipman and Reality Check TV. Danny's doing all the editing, and he filmed quite a few of the interviews as well. So they're all co-producing this with me, which is which makes it really cool because I'm not originally from the Bay Area, and I wanted to make sure this was it comes from the same purist mentality it did with the earlier LA. The LA documentaries, I could say I was there from the beginning. The Bay Area ones, I knew about all those bands, but I didn't grow up there. So having John Stranansky involved and Danny Shipman involved and Ron Quintana actually contributed a lot of stuff. So it's really, I think it's a real great representation of the early days of the San Francisco Bay Area metal scene.
It sounds like it's quite an operation having all these great people around you, and to not only, as you said, making sure that these periods in time in these locations are correctly represented, but just to have great people around you to support and make it the best that it possibly can.
Absolutely, man, and that's what's cool, and I love involving other people in it and getting their perspectives, and I'm lucky. I've got a lot of great people that I've known for the past 30 years that I still have a strong friendship and working relationship with, where I could call them up and they're just thrilled. I mean, some of these guys like John Stranansky, he's a big corporate professional guy, lives in Dallas, and I didn't think he would have the time to do it, but he's like, dude, I would love to do it. And he flew out here just on weekends to do interviews with me and to do the narration and to do all this and that while he still has his, corporate gig and stuff. He just took the time off to do this just out of pure enjoyment. So that's great, and I think a lot of people like that, they kind of want to relive that youth and reconnect with, because it was fun with him going around, with all the old bands that, he used to work with, from Damage to Death Angel to, Vain to whoever, and Vicious Rumors and Heathen and Doug Piercy and, with Anvil Chorus and meeting all these people. I mean, it was a thrill for them too. It's kind of like, well, you got to keep it fun, just like you say with the band. For me, I look at this as a real fun project, and it's just like us getting together, bullshitting about the old days. It's not, it's not like an interview. I don't look at it as like, it's just, we set up the mics, we set up the camera, and then we say go. We just fucking bullshit, and record it. And that's what I think is kind of special with the Inside Metal documentaries. They're very, very pure.
It's what makes it so appealing, and also, like, you sort of relaunching your Skull Sessions podcast as well, sort of really enjoying sort of that natural conversation and stories being shared, and just seeing which direction the conversation goes, and I think just recaptures a lot of great memories that people have, and creates new ones for people. I mean, people that are just coming into music now and wondering what the hell happened, 20, 30 odd years ago, and getting sort of that insider information and these amazing stories. So there's lots of great stuff that you've been a part of over the past several years, in particular with the documentaries, and also obviously doing a lot of the podcasting stuff as well. So it's really cool. You mentioned I think you may have mentioned it before, but I've haven't written it down. But what was the expected release date for Godfathers?
Probably the beginning of the new year. We may do a few screenings at theaters in LA and San Francisco toward the end of the year. But as far as the actual release, it'll likely be the beginning of 2020, and it should be out, of course, on DVD and on all the digital outlets. I don't know how it works in Australia, but I know people have. It's on Amazon Prime and Google Play and iTunes, which I guess is called Apple Music now, and all the other outlets, a lot of the digital outlets, and the things like Pluto TV and a lot of the stuff you could get on your Roku. So it'll be pretty readily available.
I'll chuck links on the website for people to go and have a look and check it all out. And I'm sure there'll be easy ways for us right down here in Australia to be able to check it out as well. I'll keep an eye on the time, Bob. But one thing, and I know you've told this story a million times, no doubt, but we've got Marty Friedman coming out doing a solo tour with his band in December, and I noticed that there's a story that you've told before where you've helped Marty, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you helped Marty land the gig with Megadeth. Is that right?
Yes, that is true, and that is so cool that Marty is playing out in Australia. You will absolutely be blown away, man. I mean, his live band he has right now is just phenomenal. I mean, you will definitely be blown away. So anyone on Australia that hears this podcast, if you see Marty coming into your town, definitely go check him out. But yeah, I knew Marty from, the tape trading days. He was lived in Hawaii, and even before the band Hawaii, he was in a band called Vixen, and I was pen pals with a good friend of his back in Hawaii called Daryl Amaki. And Daryl turned me on to Marty, and when Marty first came with Hawaii to LA, and this was, early 80s, I booked him in a club in LA and Orange County. We hung out and, got to know each other really well. And then they played up in San Francisco and ended up going back to Hawaii. And then when he moved to San Francisco and, met up with Varney, he did a couple things with Varney and did started Cacophony and met up with Jason Becker. And I started kind of working with him as kind of a manager, because they didn't have management. And I had been working with Marty, and it was kind of funny. Cacophony, after their second album, the Go Off album,
Dean Castronova got the Bad English gig right after that. He played it, and then Jason got the David Lee Roth gig. So, Marty was going to continue on. And that's when I really started working with Marty, and he got together with Anders Johansson, actually from Sweden, and was going to continue on with doing a new solo record because Marty still had him contracted to do some solo records. But I remember talking with Marty and he was telling me, dude, man, I really want to get a major gig. Dean just got, Bad English, and Jason's got David Lee Roth. And he goes, I love doing these solo records, but dude, if there's a gig out there, you could get me. And I had actually got him out. I didn't even realize at the time until after he told me I had got him an audition with Ozzy before they got Zakk Wylde.
Oh, wow.
And apparently they called him up because I knew I had some friends at the radio station KNAC, and my buddy at KNAC, a DJ and one of the main programmers there, said, hey, Bob, Sharon's looking for a new guitar player for Ozzy, and they're going to be auditioning. If you know anyone, get it to me. I'll make sure I get it directly to them. And I gave them a package on Marty Friedman, and lo and behold, they got it, and they called Marty over. And Marty said when he auditioned for Ozzy, it was like all these guys like fully glammed out and 6'3" guitar players, and here he is, this little guy, with jeans and stuff, but he totally shredded. And apparently they really liked him. He just wasn't big enough. Zakk is a huge guy, and that's, they kind of wanted that apparently. I don't know if that was the only, I'm sure, Zakk was very flashy and a fantastic guitar player as well, but but it was cool that they, Marty auditioned. So anyway, he goes, man, if you could hook me up with any more auditions. And right at that time, I was, very friendly with, I've known, like I said, Dave Mustaine since the Metallica days. And I knew their manager at the time, Ron Lafitte, really well. He actually used to write for My Headbanger zine back in the day. Now he's like a big time pop manager, manages all the big bands. But he at the time was telling me, hey, we're looking for a guitar player. And I said, dude, I got the guy. I sent him the package on Marty, and, it took a little while of negotiation, and they auditioned him, worked with him, and, kind of tested him out. And they were just blown away by him, obviously, and it worked out fucking great. And so, yeah, it was a great feeling to get Marty involved with Megadeth, because I think they put out some of the best albums there with Marty Friedman, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a super cool story. And I think, as you said before, he's doing amazing things even today, years and years past his time in Megadeth. And it's just incredible to see, him create his own legacy. And you've obviously had an impact in that by making sure that he's heard by the right people at that right time. And that's helped him to sort of go down the path and a very unusual path for him, in later years compared to a lot of other musicians that were around that area at the time as well. So it's super cool to hear those little moments, those stories that sort of can put somebody in a dramatically different direction.
Absolutely. And it's funny with Marty, he was always fascinated with Japan and Japanese music and stuff. So it was always something, it wasn't like just out of the blue, people go, whoa, he just took off to Japan. It was something he was always very, very interested in. And so it's not so surprising for me, but it is interesting the path they take from, you look back from the early 90s and see what happened. And it is kind of weird how the path that, Marty and others have taken. And it's so great to see Marty being as successful as he is, and living in Japan and being happy and still out there touring, which is incredible.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, I'm going to let you go. I've got a lot of documentaries to watch, and I'll put the links to everything that you've been a part of, and especially the documentaries on the website, so people can check it all out. But man, like, so good to reconnect after all these years, and I think we should do a few more of these. I'm sure you've got a lot of great stories to share, and I'd love to be able to get more people connected with what you're doing from my side of the world as well. So, Bob, thanks so much for giving me a bit of your time.
Absolutely, Andy. And I want to get you on this Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast where we could talk about Lord and all things Australian metal. So I'm definitely going to work on getting that on a future episode. So we'll get together then as well.
Sounds good. If you want to reach out to Bob, you can do so via Twitter, Facebook, and I think he's on Instagram as well. I'll have to double check. But go over the show notes over at andysocial.net. Everything will be in there, so you can go and check it out. Go and check out his podcasts, Shockwaves Skull Sessions podcast, the Inside Metal documentaries, the upcoming Godfathers of Thrash documentary coming out early next year. I'll put a whole bunch of links over in the show notes. And make sure you reach out to Bob and let him know what you thought of the chat as well. Few updates before we wrap it up. Lord. So Lord, new album Fallen Idols is out. Go and check it out on Bandcamp. That's lordofficial.bandcamp.com, or you can just go to lord.net.au. You can purchase the album if you're keen on CDs. We still have CDs. You can grab that via Amazon or the Bandcamp page. And there's starting to be, I think at the time of recording this, or this episode coming out, I should say, I don't think it's going to happen just yet, so I won't give too many details, but we're just talking to a company in the UK about doing a small amount of distribution. So we'll see how that goes. So once I get a bit more information for some of my Pommy friends and possibly European friends that are listening to the podcast, there might be some details of how you can pick up Fallen Idols in your local music store. But stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have some more info soon. But in the meantime, if you don't want to buy online and you're in Australia, you can buy from Utopia Records, Landspeed Records in Canberra. I believe Tommy Gun in Hobart will have some copies soon. And we're just trying to drip feed it out to a few other small little independent stores around the country. And we'll start to go elsewhere. If you know anybody internationally, Hellion Records in Germany as well has a bunch of copies. So go and check them out. If you know anybody, if you've got a local metal store, an independent rock metal store, alternative store that would be keen on buying a couple of copies wholesale from us, get them to reach out to me and give me their details, and I'll have a chat to them. I'm happy to get some CDs out there. We're DIY, we're old school, and that's the way we roll. I don't know where that was going. Anyway, moving along. Oh, and by the way, Kill or Be Killed, thanks so much for everybody that's been checking it out on Facebook video. Please share around the YouTube links as well. It's on Insta TV. So whatever you can do to support that video clip, get it out there, especially if you know anybody that loves a bit of Judas Priest. There's just total priest worship in this song. So if it could be potentially an open door for people to check out more of our music. So go and check all that out. Self-starter, I don't even know what episode we're up to, but just say it's episode 37 maybe, I don't know. But coming out every fortnight, and that's going up until the end of December for season 2. Season 1's still available, and you can listen to it via all the usual podcast haunts, or you can go to selfstarter.com.au. I've been drip feeding a few little hints about an upcoming podcast series. I think I mentioned in a previous episode that it's due to come out or be launched either at the end of September or the beginning of October. I've received the first draft of the artwork for the podcast, which I'm very, very happy with. So we're just making a couple of tweaks to that, and then I just need to finish the edit notes, get TY to start piecing it all together, and we should be pretty close to launching. So I'm looking forward to putting that out and sharing it all with you. I think the only main hint I gave was that if you are a metal fan, especially an old school metal fan, you may enjoy this. It's a bit of a nostalgic trip. So I'll leave it at that. So more information coming soon. Sorry to be one of those annoying people saying, hey, big announcement coming soon. So, well, you can be the judge of whether it's big or not, but there's something coming, and I'm looking forward to sharing it all with you. And that's it, folks. I'm going to stop crapping on. Until next week, folks, episode 200. I don't know who I'm going to have on next. Oh, I tried to get John Farnham. It didn't work. Anyway, there'll be somebody next week. Stay tuned. Thanks so much for the support. Until then, ta-ta.